It is now time for me to introduce the final session of day one, and the person who we have joining us is Simon Sinek. Simon is an unshakable optimist. He believes in a bright future and our ability to build it together. Described as a visionary thinker with a rare intellect, Simon has devoted his professional life to help advance a vision of the world that does not yet exist. A world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe wherever they are, and end the day fulfilled by the work they do. He continues to share inspiration through his best-selling books, including Start With Why, Leaders Eat Last, and The Infinite Game, as well as his podcast, A Bit of Optimism. In addition, Simon is the founder of the Optimism Company, a leadership and learning and development company, and he publishes other inspiring thinkers and doers through his publishing partnership with Penguin Random House called Optimism Press. So this is going to be a session where we invite all of you to share your questions. We want this to be a question, an interactive session where you'll be able to send in the things that you want to ask Simon. So if you haven't already downloaded the Woby app, that is the way that you'll be able to ask those questions. Please, you can find the QR code on the back of your pass, so you can download that now if you haven't done so. So get those questions coming in. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Simon Sinek.
How are you? Good. Easy. Very well, thank you. Thanks.
Over here. Simon, welcome. Welcome to New York.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Absolutely. It's not the first time. Delighted that you're here. As I say, we want this to be hopefully an opportunity for the audience to send their questions in, so I'll be taking as many of those as possible. But I wanted just to kick off with a couple of questions. Specifically, as you know, the big theme for the World Business Forum this year is purpose. This is a topic that goes to the very heart of your work. Let's maybe just talk about some of the biggest challenges that you think organizations are facing today when it comes to cultivating a purpose-driven culture and how they can sort of overcome some of those obstacles.
So here's the good news. The good news is having purpose at work and recognizing that people want their work to be worth more than the money they make is now accepted. That's a good thing. Talking about purpose no longer sounds like some ooey-gooey hippy-dippy stuff. It actually sounds like serious business practice, so we like that. So much so that almost every company seems to have a purpose statement. Just visit their website and click purpose and it'll tell you what it means. So we like that. The problem is, and when you talk about the difficulty, is how many companies are actually making decisions based on that purpose. And that number falls woefully low. And if you don't actually make decisions to advance your purpose, then it's just marketing. So for example, the company CVS, which is pharmacies, they have a purpose statement, which is something to the effect of taking care of our customers and protecting their health, something like that. They would have meetings with hospital leaders and doctors to, do deals. And at the end of those meetings, there was always an awkward silence when the doctors would say, so you say that you care about health and that's your purpose, then why do you sell cigarettes? And they realized that they had a problem. And so they came back and they made a unilateral decision to remove every pack of cigarettes from every single one of their stores. Wall Street freaked out, started criticizing the company, telling them that all of those sales would then go to other stores, and how dare CVS do that. And their stock price was punished in the short term. Here's what actually happened. Where CVS had a critical mass of stores, they actually saw smoking decline just in those communities. So not selling cigarettes actually helped more people quit smoking. The other thing it did was it made people choose to come to CVS, and they saw the average sale price go up. And, as Will talked about, when the people who work for the company hear their leaders talk about having purpose, but can see clearly that they're not making decisions to advance that purpose, and they saw their company take what should have been a huge financial risk and even a financial loss to do something, the pride to work for a company that actually did the things that it stood for, you saw morale skyrocket. And the best thing about it was the company continued. Their stock price easily recovered, of course, it always does. And all of those sales didn't go to other stores. And you started to see the company, as Will talked about, thrive beyond, they more than made up for the money that they lost in cigarette sales, which, by the way, was billions of dollars. The problem is that other companies who were in their space never did the same thing. So they said that they cared about health, but they continued to sell cigarettes as well.
Yeah.
So doing the thing and saying the thing that you believe are not the same thing.
And so how can we start overcoming, what are the barriers to do that? Because, we see that there's profit margins to be met, there's results, quarterly results to be hit. So what would be some of your advice you would give to leaders to be able to, you're saying it's not the same thing, but to actually make them the same thing?
Well, this is the whole concept behind a finite and an infinite mindset, to be quite honest. When you talk about companies that are obsessed with their quarterly numbers, what they're doing is playing with a finite mindset versus the companies that are purpose-driven, that are playing with an infinite mindset. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, let me sort of define the terms really quickly. In the mid-1980s, a philosopher and theologian by the name of Dr. James Carse defined these two types of games, finite games and infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed-upon objective. Football, baseball. If there's a winner, necessarily there has to be a loser, and more importantly, there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. Then you have infinite games. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players, which means you don't necessarily know who all the other players are, and new players can join the game at any time. The rules are changeable, which means every player can play however they want. And the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. We are players in infinite games every day, whether we know it or not. Nobody wins career. You'll never be declared the winner of career. It's never going to happen. There's no such thing as being number one in your marriage. You can try. It will not work. There's no such thing as winning education, and there's definitely no such thing as being the winner of business. When Circuit City went bankrupt, Best Buy didn't win anything. Business is an infinite game. New players can join, you can run your business however you want, and the objective is to stay in business, obviously. The problem is if you listen to the language of too many of our business leaders, it becomes abundantly clear that they have no clue the game they're playing in. They talk about being number one, being the best, or beating their competition. Based on what? Based upon what agreed objectives, metrics, and timeframes. And this is a problem because when we play with a finite mindset in an infinite game, when we play to win in a game that has no finish line, there are some consistent and predictable outcomes. The big ones, the decline of trust, the decline of cooperation, and the decline of innovation. And so when we talk about companies that fail to advance purpose, it's usually because they're playing with a finite mindset. Beat the competition, hit the number, right? At the expense of the health of the actual company and the health of the culture. Other companies that play with an infinite mindset understand that we want this game to last forever. And sometimes we're ahead and sometimes we're behind, but there's no such thing as winning. And those companies that are more purpose-driven have built in, inherently, a sense of patience. Yes, absolutely, it's good to have goals. There's no problem with having targets, and sometimes you'll hit them and sometimes you miss them. The more important thing is, what's your momentum? Are you trending up? And so if you have an infinite mindset, it is much easier to be purpose-driven. In fact, it sort of happens by accident, it happens automatically.
Yeah. Super. Right. So now we're going to dive into some of the questions from the audience, which are starting to flood in. So let's start with this one from Jess. She says, "We heard from Will about leaders clarifying the what and why and letting their team come up with how. What tips do you have for getting leaders comfortable with giving that control and empowerment to their teams?" That's from Jess.
Jess, where are you? Where are you? Scream out. Okay. It's a good question and it's a hard question because for any of us who have built a business, and for many of us, if you're an entrepreneur, you were the chief cook and bottle washer from the beginning of time, and you've slowly let go of all those things. And I always think it's funny that our team talks to us like we don't know how anything works when we used to do everything. But one of the most difficult things to do for a leader is to let go. Because at the end of the day, we trust ourselves. Sometimes we say things like, well, I'm just going to do a better job, so why don't I just do it? But the problem is we're making the whole business reliant on us. And that's a weak business. That's power of personality. That's not a strong business. I'll give you an example. David Marquet, it's the second time we've invoked him, the submarine driver, the submarine captain, talked about how on his submarine they had one guy who was the best guy at parking the submarine. He was gifted in parking submarines. And so whenever they came into port and they needed to park the submarine, guess who they got to park the submarine? And then it occurred to the captain once that what if he's sick? What if he can't do it? I have a problem. And so he asked somebody else to park the submarine. And here's the problem. Didn't go well. And so the temptation is to go back and ask the best submarine parker to do it again. But he didn't. He waited and he let the new guy try again and again and again until he became an expert submarine parker. And then guess what they did? They asked for a third guy to do it. And what they're doing is building a bench. And we sometimes are that submarine parker. We know we're the best at it. We've been doing it longer than everybody else. We usually care more than everybody else. And so the question is how do you have the patience to let somebody fall and try again, fall and try again, and fall and try again? What will give them the motivation to try again is that they know that we're in their corner cheering them on. It is very hard, I'm not going to lie, but it is essential if you want to build a scalable business.
Super. Thanks, Simon. So this one, let's pick up from Ed. Ed says, how do we encourage, because you describe yourself as an optimist, and Ed says, how do we encourage leaders not to confuse optimism with complacency, but to see optimism within the lens of a strong belief in the creativity and common touch of humans?
Oh, that's so good. Where are you, Ed? Shout. Thank you. So I find that combination of optimism as complacency really interesting. The more common question I get is, how does optimism not be sort of naive or blindly positive? And I love this idea that optimism is complacency. And I guess the connection is that if somebody's optimistic, that they don't need to work hard because everything will just work out. I think we have to clearly define what optimism is. Optimism is the undying belief that the future is bright, but it allows for reality to exist. And I think complacency has no room to exist in blind positivity, or as we're calling it, sort of blind optimism. So for example, we can be in darkness, we can be in difficulty, and we can be in struggle. And the optimist says, look, these are hard times, and I do not know how long we are going to be in these hard times, but what is necessary is for us to come together, work hard, take care of each other, and I am confident that we will get through this and come out of this stronger than we went in. That's what optimism sounds like. But I don't think you can be an optimist without hard work. I think the idea of just sitting back and thinking that the world would take care of itself, what as you're describing as complacency, is that's naive and blind. Yeah, optimism takes a lot of hard work because the world is difficult and markets are difficult and everything doesn't go the way we want. I mean, what's the old adage? If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So yeah. Optimism is hard work. That's a great question.
So Justin, specific situation that he's facing. He says, we've grown very quickly, and under previous HR, screening was less than adequate. So we have people who do not have the intellect, work ethic, or even the desire to be a high performer. But these people are in key roles. How do we deal with the transition of bringing in better performers who are better qualified without destroying morale? We care about all people under our care, but nonetheless, they are all underperformers by any metric. You're going to have to ask Justin where he is now.
Justin, why don't we answer this one hypothetically? You didn't come with your boss, did you? Thanks for the easy question. Thank you very much. Good night. Yeah. Okay, so let's tackle this one. Underperformance is sometimes obviously a condition of the people we hired, of course. And sometimes we hire poorly and sometimes we make a mistake. That happens, that's okay. Sometimes underperformance is a condition of the work environment that they're in. Let's give people the grace that if we change the leadership environment and changed our mentality, that we actually would help them. And we're all guilty of this. Anybody who's ever been in a leadership position is guilty of forming a narrative about someone as an underperformer, ugh, they screw up everything. And then what ends up happening is all we do is think about them and treat them as an underperformer, and all we do is notice the things that they get wrong. And then when we give them feedback sessions, it's usually us correcting minor things over and over and over again to the point where we completely destroy their confidence. And what I recommend, and by the way, we're all guilty of this, and I think it's essential for leadership teams to check each other, that when somebody goes down a path of creating a narrative that someone is an underperformer as if it's a character flaw, that we interrupt that and say, is that true? What have they gotten right? What are they good at? And if you catch people doing things right versus always catching them doing things wrong, that positive reinforcement is so much more powerful than catching them doing things wrong. It's also okay to announce that you expect a lot of your people. It's okay to say, we as an organization can do better than we have been doing, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to help each other and push further and push harder, and we are here to help you and coach you. And for the people who raise their hands and say, I'll take the coaching, or for us to offer the coaching to people where they need help. But the only time for me that somebody should be asked to leave the company is if they prove themselves to be uncoachable, if there's no willingness to learn whatsoever. I'll give you one story that really captures that the environment and our attitude towards our people really matters. I went on a business trip to Las Vegas a bunch of years ago. And they put me up at the Four Seasons in Las Vegas, lovely hotel. And the reason it's a lovely hotel is not because of the fancy beds. Any hotel can buy a fancy bed. It's because of the people who work there. And in the Four Seasons in Las Vegas, they happen to have a coffee bar in the lobby. So one afternoon, I went and bought myself a cup of coffee, and the barista working that day was a kid named Noah. Noah was funny and engaging and charming, and I stood there for far too long buying a cup of coffee just because I enjoyed talking to Noah. And as is my nature, I asked Noah, do you like your job? And without skipping a beat, Noah said, I love my job. Now, in my line of work, that's significant. Like is rational. I like the people I work with, I get paid well, I like my job. Love is emotional. It's a higher order connection, right? Do you love your wife? I like her a lot, right? Not the same. Noah said, I love my job. This kid has a higher order connection to his job. So I wanted to know what was the root of that connection. So I immediately followed up and said, Noah, tell me specifically what's happening at the Four Seasons. What is the Four Seasons what is the Four Seasons doing that you would say to me, you love your job? And without skipping a beat, Noah said that throughout the day, his managers walk past him and ask them if there's something he needs, something that they can do to help him do his job better. Not just his manager, any manager. And then he said, I also work for another hotel group. And there, the managers walk past me every day and catch me when I'm doing something wrong. There, all they do is drive my performance. There, I like to keep my head below the radar and get through the day and collect my paycheck and go home. He said, only at the Four Seasons do I feel I can be myself. The reason this is such a significant story is this is the exact same human being, and yet our experience of him and his quality of performance is profoundly different, not because of the person, but because of the leadership environment in which he's working. So, to answer your question, Justin, let's give them the grace that they are higher performers than we think they are, or even they think they are. And if we create an environment where we can catch them doing things right and give them the coaching that they need, I bet more than half of them would surprise you.
Can we take, this is a mini parenthesis here, but we need to address this because the questions are getting filled with it. Why are you wearing two watches?
That's a...
And people can stop asking.
So, is it annoying people? I'm giving good advice and people are focused on why I'm wearing two watches. Have you heard anything I've said up until now? The reason is somebody gave me the Apple Watch, which was really nice of them. But I don't want to wear an Apple Watch because I don't want to be connected all the time. I don't want to get texts. I don't want to get anything. I don't want it buzzing and distracting me. I want to be fully present all the time. But I do know that it's the single best tracker, sort of like like better than a Whoop, better than an Oura Ring. Mine's not charged, I just like the way it looks. I don't need a piece of technology to tell me I had a bad night's sleep. I mean, I've been up since 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm really grumpy. And so I have everything turned off on it except all of the tracking and pulse stuff. So all it's doing is tracking my health. That's all.
Thank you.
Which I'm sure makes the people at Apple who work so hard so proud that I'm basically using it as a glorified Whoop.
Right, let's get back to the more serious stuff. This from Crystal. How do you hold people accountable for high standards of excellence while also giving them the space to take risks and fail?
Super easy.
Oh, good.
Yeah, super easy. You'll always get the behavior you reward. You'll always get behavior you reward. So when I was young in my career, I worked for a big ad agency, and we had a big new business pitch, and it was the senior leaders. Wait, who asked the question?
Crystal.
Crystal, where are you? Shout. Okay, thank you. So when young in my career, I worked for a big ad agency, and we had a big new business pitch coming up, and it was normal for the senior executives to do the new business pitches. I was the junior of the most junior. And so all the senior executives went away for Christmas vacation. The pitch was in January, this was December. And I was assigned to work on this pitch, and they told me to prepare the war room, which basically means hang the research on the walls. So me and this other junior person, we did that in an hour, and we still had a week to kill. And so we decided to do the pitch, just to fill time, I guess. So we read all the research, we went through it, we developed an insight, we came up with a strategy, and we actually wrote the pitch deck. And when the senior executives came back from their vacations, we presented the work that we had done. And they were so impressed, they actually used our pitch, they used our strategy for the new business pitch. And we lost the business, we did not win the pitch. And my boss gave me a huge promotion. They moved me up 2 levels because he wasn't rewarding my outcome, he was rewarding my initiative. And by rewarding my initiative, guess what I did more of? Took more initiative. If he had come to me and said, look, amazing, so glad you did that, but you didn't win the pitch, so I'm not going to give you anything. Next time I would have done nothing, or I would have taken the safe road and simply asked somebody else to help me or waited for the senior guys to come back. And so you're always going to get the behavior you reward. And I think very often what we forget is that we over-index on trying to incentivize performance. You can't incentivize performance, you can only incentivize behavior. So what behaviors are more likely to lead to success? The Marine Corps teaches this to their officers. They understand that good leaders sometimes suffer mission failure, and bad leaders sometimes enjoy mission success. So simply rewarding the outcome does not ensure you get the kind of person you want in the company. So get the behavior and figure out a reward system, whether it's formal or informal, to recognize and reward the behavior, and you'll get more of it.
Super. This one from Laura. She says, we heard Will, and I know you were watching as well backstage, talk about his pre-meal team meetings. What components do you deem essential for a regular team meeting to help build culture, morale, and team trust?
Laura, shout out. Hi. So especially in this modern day and age where we have blended workforces or we have virtual workforces, it actually requires more work, more of what Will is doing, of what he recommends to actually maintain cohesion and trust in an organization. So Isaac Stern, the famous violinist, said music is what happens between the notes. Well, in a company, trust is what happens between the meetings. It's the sauntering into the conference room, it's the walking out of the conference room, it's the chatter you have in the hallway, it's bumping into somebody and be like, oh, I forgot to tell you, it's gonna get a coffee, it's gonna get lunch, it's stuff like that. All of those things by themselves innocuous, but in total, they start to build cohesion, trust, relationships, and all those other good mushy things. In a virtual scenario, for example, we don't have between the meetings, we just have the meetings. And so we have to artificially create those things. So one of the things we do as a company is we do a weekly huddle. We come together about 30, 45 minutes every single week, the whole team, and except for some high-level announcements, there's very little to any business discussed. It's just how you doing? And we break out into little breakout rooms that you can do on Zoom, and we talk about whatever. There's no subject set. We talk about important things, unimportant things, what somebody did that weekend. It doesn't really matter. And the point is we're getting to know each other. And these meetings, these huddles have become absolutely essential. I'm a great believer in bringing people together, especially if you have a virtual organization. The annual offsite. The other thing that I'm a great believer in is the hackathon, where if you have a difficult problem to solve, if you have an initiative that's coming up, to take the core team of people who are working on it, 2, 3, 4 people, have them all go to one city and work together and come out with a solution or options. And now and then, I also believe in taking somebody who's not from that team, because you want a completely different perspective, and add them to that hackathon as well so they can offer something. So the most important thing that in Will's advice is the discipline to always do these things, that bring together human connection and allow people to contribute and have their point of view. Hackathons, by the way, I don't think should have the most senior people in there. I think for every reason that Will talked about, which is people on the front lines probably have more information. I was going to give more, but I realized I've probably given enough. I can over answer any question.
There are lots more here, so don't worry about it. We're not short of material. We have Leanne asking, you talked about affording people grace in a society where social pressures are mounting, patience is waning, and change is constant. What are your tips for affording grace to yourself and your team at a time when it is desperately needed?
Oh, great question. Shout out.
Leanne.
Where? Hi, Leanne. How are you? I think offering grace, you're 100% right. And I think offering grace it's a practice. And when I say it's a practice, meaning it takes practice. My friend Rick Elias is a remarkable human being. Rick, do you remember the US Airways flight that landed on the Hudson? Rick was on that plane. He talks about it in remarkable terms, because he said he got the greatest experience of his life because he got to have that near-death experience where it was 90 seconds, which is just long enough, he says. Too much, not too little, just long enough. And he talks about how he got to have that near-death experience where he got to have all the lessons that people talk about in near-death experience without any survivor's guilt. No one was hurt. No one died, nothing. 100% of people walked away just fine. And so it was this perfect microcosm of a life lesson. And one of the things he walked away from, and just as a quick aside, Rick thought of himself as this high-flying executive. He spent 18 years building a remarkable company, and he built it to something like, I think it was $80 million or something, $100 million, most of his life to build this company. He has this near-death experience. It profoundly changes the way he leads. He built a $6 billion business since. Red Ventures is the name of the company. And so one of the things he learned was he had to learn to forgive himself. And he says holding grudges or having anger, or labeling people. He says all it did was distract him. All it did was hold him back. And he said he wasn't even good at forgiving others until he could learn to forgive himself. It's okay. It's okay. You screwed up. It's okay. And asking for forgiveness, I think, is a big one as well. And so I think your question in a world that seems desperately lacking in grace, I believe change starts at home. And if we can learn to give ourselves grace, but more important, to give those around us grace. And by the way, we're practiced at this, because when we first went into lockdown, it was kind of amazing, if you remember, which is a lot of leaders, whether they were effective or ineffective prior to COVID, every single one of them picked up the phone and called their people and said, "Are you okay?" And we had tremendous grace for people. that their kids were running in the backgrounds and their pets were jumping through the screen, and somebody would be slow at hitting a deadline, and we sort of were okay with it because we understood the pressures, because we were sharing in those pressures. And I think very often we don't give grace to people because we don't assume that they have anything else going on in their lives except the work they should be doing for us. One person agrees. And I think grace and empathy go together as well. And I'll give you a real life example of what grace looks like in business. So here's a fairly normal scenario. You walk into someone's office and say, hey, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. If you don't pick up your numbers in the fourth quarter, I don't know what's going to happen. It's fairly normal. I think what that conversation sounds like with grace is, hey, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. Are you okay? What's going on? I'm worried about you. And you think about that person who receives grace, how they go home and talk to their kids and talk to their spouse, or how they talk to their colleagues. And then think about how those people then talk to their friends and talk to their colleagues. And the ripple goes. And before you know it, there's a lot more people offering grace simply because we went first.
Super. Thanks, Simon. Maybe picking up on a similar thread, this one from Andre. He says, what do you think the role of companies, non-profits, and even government should be in cultivating optimism, spreading optimism in times of societal hardship, adversity, and fear? What does this sort of leadership look like from our leadership tables, and how can it address how our own people experience that same societal hardship, adversity, and fear at individual and family levels?
Did you type all of that into your phone? Where are you?
Well, I think he deserves to get the question answered after that.
I mean, that's a good question. I think what you're touching on is something that we all feel, which it seems for some reason we've lost idealism. Everybody's become so pragmatic and practical, and I think short-termism is pragmatic. We can easily tweak the machine to hit a number in 3 months. Maybe 12. And I think we've just forgotten about long-term because it's too hard to tweak the machine. No company even has long-term planning anymore, or if they do, it's 3 years or 5 years. It's not 10 years or 20 years or 50 years. And even that 5-year plan, they're not following it. And I think what our country, and necessarily our businesses, but what our leaders are lacking is dreams and idealism. And imagine a world if. Imagine what world would look like if, and let's commit our energies. Let's commit our company to help building that world in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just the way we run our company. And so I lament the loss of idealism. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, you can go back to Ronald Reagan or John F. Kennedy, so I don't care what your politics are. And both of those presidents talked about world peace, peace on earth in their inaugural addresses. Well, when was the last time we heard a president say that they were motivated by world peace? In fact, talking about it now, it actually sounds corny and cheesy. And I think that's sad, that we think world peace is now a corny idea. And if we just look at the state of the world, my goodness, I think it would take, what a wonderful thing it would be for more of us to believe in world peace. Because absent idealism, all we do is look for right or wrong. Absent idealism, we no longer see ourselves on the same team in pursuit of the dream. We see each other in opposition to me being right or you being wrong. And if we're waiting for our governments to do it, we're going to be waiting a long time. And so I'm going to go back to the answer I gave some moments ago, which is I think change begins at home. I think having a sense of idealism at work, being the leader with ideals, with a vision, an unrealizable vision, I think is essential. So you hear us talk about it in our company. We imagine a world, that's how we talk about our vision, literally living in our imagination. We imagine a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe wherever they are, and end the day fulfilled by the work that they do. We are all fully aware that we will never get there, but we will die trying, which is the point.
Excellent. Super. Let's pick up with this one from Perry. He says, I worked as a correctional officer at a state prison for nearly 10 years, and Start With Why inspired me to change careers, where I am now in tech sales and work with incredibly bright people. What are some recommendations in combating imposter syndrome in this context?
Where are you? Okay. you have more skills because of your work in corrections than the people you work with in tech and tech sales. And what did Teddy Roosevelt say? Comparison is the thief of joy. And I think when we feel imposter syndrome, what we're doing is comparing ourselves to other people based on their skill set. It's like saying how good we are at playing our sport on their field. And of course, we're all imposters if I compare my strengths to yours based on your standards, based on how good you are at the things that you do. And yet we leave behind all the things that make us who we are, right? And so here's one thing I know about corrections officers that I admire: the ability to stay calm in pressure. Corrections officers are spat on and worse. You've had things thrown at you, and you know that you have to come back to work every day and work with these same people. And the remarkable thing about corrections officers is their ability not to take things personally. They understand that the uniform is being spat on, it's not you being spat on. And that is true when in a sales call somebody hangs up on you. They hung up on the sales call, they didn't hang up on you. You have a strength of ego not to take things personally because of your experience that everybody else doesn't have. And I would literally do an itinerary and think to yourself, like, who am I, where do I come from? And that's the stuff you want to be proud of. I also think we have to own the stuff we suck at. Now, what do I mean by that, right? When I talk about being vulnerable, a lot of people in the business world like shudder, but at the mere utterance of the word vulnerable. Of course, none of us want to be weak. We all want to present ourselves as strong and all-knowing. And so I'm not going to admit that I don't know things or that you're smarter than me, right? But it works just fine if you own it. For example, if you go, oh, you guys are so much smarter than me. I don't really understand this sector, and I really need somebody to explain it to me. Okay? That no one wants to follow you, right? But if you walk into a meeting and be like, I don't understand anything that we're talking about. Everything you're talking about is beyond me. Like, you guys have been doing this for 10 years. I just got here. And so I'm going to have somebody explain this to me. And as soon as you do, I'll be great. But if somebody can please just explain it because I'm an idiot when it comes to this stuff, and you just own it, all of a sudden, people want to follow you. And by the way, they will follow your lead, and they'll tell you the stuff that they need help on too.
Great advice. This one from Charlie. He says, with COVID and the pandemic, many jobs moved to remote work. Some have remained remote. Mm-hmm. Now the country is experiencing an epidemic of loneliness. Mm-hmm. Is this a symptom of causation or correlation? How do you build connection in a virtual workforce? Should we bring back workers to the office at least partially, if for nothing else than to bring back the aspect of healthy relationships and connections?
Yeah, it's causation, it's not correlation, let's be blunt. Especially young people who started their careers. Where are you so I can answer your question?
It's Charlie.
Charlie, thanks, Charlie. I know it's random, but most of the questions are coming from the right side.
It's nothing to do with me.
It's just interesting. You asked me why I'm wearing 2 watches. I can ask why the questions are coming from the right side. Charlie, I think that it's causation. I mean, human beings are social animals, right? Like we know that solitary confinement is actually a form of torture. Like we know that. And I think for a lot of people who started their careers virtually, who think it's the greatest thing in the world, don't realize the damage that it's doing. It's a bit of a slow-boiling frog. And they're suffering that loneliness, that anxiety. They're looking to treat it in unhealthy ways, right? And then when we ask them to come back to work, they freak out. And the anxiety takes hold, and they think it's the work that made them freak out. And they don't realize the connection to being home alone. And part of the problem is there's a lot of people, particularly younger, but not exclusively, particularly, that skews younger, that they really think, I have a friend who's super smart, works for a company she believes in, really likes the work that she does, and she has said to me that if they make her go back to work, she's quitting. She's so in love with being virtual. The way I think, and by the way, I don't think the dust has settled. I think it's still in flux, and we actually, for people who are predicting what the future of work looks like, I don't think we actually know yet. Because we also don't want to create class structures, right? Where people who do accounting or back office function can work from home, but like people who have essential jobs, whether they work on a factory floor or customer service, front facing, that we make them come to work, then what we're doing is creating a class structure, the haves and the have-nots, really unhealthy. But I think one of the most important things we can do is reframe coming to work as an act of service. What do I mean by that? So we know that coming to work favored the extrovert. We know that. Extroverts like coming to work. And when the pandemic hit and we all went home, the introverts all went, yes! And the extroverts freaked out, right? And now we're being asked to come back to work, and the extroverts are going, yes! And the introverts are going, freaking out, right? And the answer is we're blended. We're a mixed, different team. And I'm a great believer that if we can frame it as service, which is, hey, listen, we have friends of ours, our colleagues, who are extroverts and really need to come to work. So I need you to take one for the team now and then and come to work with the team to help out your colleagues. Oh, and by the way, we also work with some introverts. And they really need the time to recharge and be at home and just have a couple of days of focus. They're more productive at home than they are at work. So give them the grace, there's that word again, give them that grace and help them out. Because I think what we've done is we made it all about ourselves, where I like to work and what I want and what I need, and we're completely deaf to what anybody else needs. And I think if we can reframe it as an act of service, we're going to find a better balance quicker.
Excellent. Moving straight on. So this one is from Nadav, asks, how do you as an optimist feel about AI in the workplace and the possibility of widespread job loss?
Where's Nadav? Shout out. Oh, hello.
Down on the right. Yeah, you've got to look right first.
Just saying. So when the internet first showed up, we feared the same thing. And the jobs changed. So, for example, when the IRS announced many years ago that they were going to digitize our taxes. They're going to fire all the accountants who went through our taxes, and they're going to make it a digital experience. And they promised this massive savings because of all of the accountants that would no longer be needed. Do you know how much money they actually saved? Zero, because they had to build up their IT departments. The jobs changed. The jobs changed. Will there be losses? 100% there will be losses. Will there be some pain? 100% there will be some pain. Will the society correct and figure out how the new essential jobs based on the new technology? Of course. And it's because we don't know and because it's the unknown, it's scary, and so we're all a bit doomsday about it. Because all we can do is compare it to the situation we have now. So take my world, for example. Writing, right? If you in some way, shape, or form have to do writing, advertising, public relations, where you have to write something for someone, yeah, AI can do that really quickly. But it's the editing that's now become more difficult. In the writing world, it was the writer who was the hero, and the editor was treated like a disposable asset. It's just going to switch. The writer will be treated as the disposable asset, and the editor will be the hero, because you're going to take an okay job by AI, and someone has to edit it to make it good. And so I think the tensions and the pressures will change. I think AI, what makes AI scary to me is not that it's going to take jobs away, which it will, but it'll create new jobs as well, which it will, which we don't know yet. And that's scary. Not knowing is scary. The thing that scares me most about it is the speed at which it's being developed. The internet took over a decade, and look how it changed our lives. And the fact that this is in months, if not quicker, that to me is the scary part, because if you just take the internet as comparison, we still have laws from 1996 governing the ethics of how the internet works. And this is going way faster, and that's the part that I think. And the problem is you can't ask companies to slow down. They all have the twisted logic. Well, if we don't, somebody else will, which is not entirely true. But that scares me. It's the speed more than the job loss. I think we'll go through a period of difficulty, and it'll find its balance.
Excellent. Another sort of switching topic slightly here. This is from John. He says, many organizations are weaving the sustainability agenda into their purpose, both real and perceived as greenwashing. What advice do you give leaders to really challenge virtue signaling versus achieving the real benefits that come from addressing this opportunity?
It's a great question. Where are you? I mean, it skews right. I think this is the same question as the purpose question, which is, are you saying it because it's good for marketing and that it's virtue signaling, or are you actually doing it? And I think it's right for us to hold companies accountable and ask to see the numbers, ask to see what they're actually doing. I'll give you one example of where I think companies are good at spinning it, and I think we have to hold them accountable. So I saw a presentation at a conference by the chief environmental officer of a very large food company. And she gave this amazing presentation how her company was saving water and saving electricity and all the positive benefits it was doing to the environment. And because I'm a cynical bastard, I went up to her afterwards and I said, hey, look, I really appreciated your presentation, and I really appreciate that you're doing all those things. I am fully aware that you save a ton of money by using less water and using less electricity. So I'm going to believe you're not doing it to save the environment, that you're doing it to save money, which is fine. Because if you really cared about health and the environment, you put chemicals on all of your food, and you have a chief environmental officer, but you don't have a chief health officer. So reconcile that for me, that you care so much about life, but not the human life, just the saving of the money. The conversation was uncomfortable. But the point is, I think we need to point those things out. I think we need to point out, even if the motivation is for money, it's kind of like giving to charity. It's like they only give to charity to see their name in the program, but they gave to charity, right? So it's not always bad that they're motivated by money, but I think we need to hold companies accountable, and actually, I think we need to see demonstrations. I think we need new metrics. I'm a great believer that we need new metrics in business. There's nothing wrong with the old metrics of share price or profit or revenue, but I think we need new metrics for the world that we live in to tell everybody that we're actually doing the thing that we say we're doing. So yeah, I think it's an opportunity to create those metrics. And then B Corp, I think, is on that path. Like when you see that B Corp seal on a company, that gives us confidence that they're actually doing the right thing. So I think companies like B Corp and things like that, I think, are a great way to hold companies accountable.
Excellent. This one from Kirby says, to create positive change, if you could ask executive leaders to do only one thing and one thing only, what would that ask be? Kirby? Yes! Representing the left side of the room. You're a hero, my friend. If I could ask leaders to do one thing, that's a great question. So I think that great leaders are students of leadership. And so if there's one thing I want a leader to do, it's to take themselves on. If there's one thing that I want a leader to do, it's to take themselves on and work to be the leader that they wish they had. And by the way, you don't have to have a position of rank or authority to be a leader. Leadership is the awesome responsibility to see those around us rise, and any one of us can be the leader we wish we had, but we have to become a student of leadership. And you don't become a leader just because you get promoted and now you have some title and a new business card. All you are is you got a new title and a new business card. You're the same idiot as you were the day before. Leadership is a skill that must be practiced and learned. And I think this is the reason we started the Optimism company. The reason I started the Optimism company was for the very simple reason is we realized that the skills of leadership weren't being taught. And we wanted to offer those skills to companies so that they would teach them to their people. Things like how to listen, things like effective confrontation, the things like how to resolve conflict. These essential human skills. I hate the term soft skills, hate the term. You have hard skills and human skills. There's nothing soft about them. Hard skills are the skills we need to do our jobs. Human skills are the skills we need to be better humans, and we have to excel at both of them. And so I think what companies have to do is teach people human skills, and what leaders have to do is take themselves on and have the courage to say, I have more to learn, and study those human skills and study becoming a leader. Excellent. So we're coming probably to the last couple of questions here. So we'll go with this one from Patty. Patty,
left side, right side?
So she says, Jim Collins, who you may know was speaking this morning, shared some ways in which his thinking has changed since he wrote his first books. What would you change as you reflect on your earlier work, if anything?
So the thing about Start With Why, Jim and I are very different in our approach to how we wrote our first works. Jim's an academic who made a study of things and wrote down the patterns that he saw from his research. I'm an idiot and don't know how to do what he did. I mean, it's true. It's funny because it's true. And my experience was different, which is my experience was I went through personal agony and personal pain and loss of my own passion at work. A series of events that left me not wanting to wake up and go to work anymore, and yet superficially everything was good in my life. And so I was very embarrassed to say, I am struggling. And I used all of my energy to pretend that I was happier, more successful, and more in control than I felt. And it wasn't until a friend of mine came to me, something's wrong, and said to me, something's wrong, did I come clean about what I was going through, which gave me the confidence and the weight off my shoulders to take all of that energy that I was lying, hiding, and faking to find a solution. And the solution that I discovered was this thing called the why. I knew what I did, and I was good at it. I knew how I did it, and I could tell you how I was different from other people who did what I did, but I couldn't tell you why I was getting out of bed in the morning, and I couldn't tell you why it mattered. And I realized that was the source of my darkness, not having any sense of purpose or cause or why I should be doing what I'm doing. And that journey of trying to discover my why, and more importantly, how to help my friends and other people I met discover their why, the impact was huge. I watched people have renewed passion for their work, where they had double the amount of passion for the jobs they had, or some of them would start businesses that they've only dreamed of. And I just saw this incredible rise in passion like my own. And it wasn't supposed to be an academic thing. I made no formal study of it. It wasn't supposed to be a commercial thing. It just kept working. And people kept asking me to help their friends, and I said yes. And then somebody said, will you help my company? And I said yes. And I applied a scientific method to it, which is I wanted to find all the places it would fail so I could make the idea better. And so somebody would come to me and say, will this work in manufacturing? And I said, I don't know, let's try. And it just kept working. And so I'm fairly confident that that it actually does work, because I've tried to make it fail for years and it just kept working. And so though there are some details that I would definitely change in the book, I'm still an absolute devotee to the original gospel that was written all those years ago.
Super. So let's make this the last one, I think, looking at the clock. So let's do this from Manny. Ask Simon, what do you think about 2024? What is a key word for you as you move into the new year? What would be the word of the year for you and optimists in the coming year?
Manny? I'm going to go back to the question before. You know, I don't believe in New Year's resolutions. I do like New Year's themes. And I hadn't thought about my New Year's theme yet. And so you bringing it up, I think, is nice timing coming into Thanksgiving. But I think that my New Year's theme in 2024 should be about idealism. I think the question that we had some moments ago, and the loss of idealism, I think we should all imagine what a perfect world should look like, and we should talk about it. And we should talk about it obsessively. And we should think about how we can lead our lives, manage our relationships, and build our business to take us one step closer to that ideal state. As I said before, I believe change starts at home. And if we can change the way we lead, I mean, just think about the number of people in this room, that if we can go home and we can learn to have grace, and we can learn to have empathy, and we can learn to change the narrative we have about some of the people on our team, that maybe they're just in a bad situation, that they had bad leadership. Think about the ripple effects that just this one room can have, and how many employees, how many people we work with just in this one room, that by us treating them with dignity, us treating them with respect, us learning those human skills, that people feel seen and heard and understood, that those people go home happier, they treat their families better, they treat their friends better, they treat their colleagues better, those people go home and they treat their families. I think the possibility for world peace literally exists in this room alone.
I can't think of a much better point to end on than that. World peace. That's a pretty good point to finish.
Good.
Simon, that's been a fantastic hour. It's flown
Chris.
by. Thank you. And thank you for all your questions. Simon Sinek.
Thank you.